So I have an interesting predicament on my channel. I love laptops. I love tweaking them, overclocking them, undervolting them. I find this a true challenge. And maybe I'm just a masochist. I'm a mechanical engineer after all. You basically have to be a masochist to get through college. But there's something about overclocking a laptop that I think really proves your mettle as a tweaker. And it's because, in my opinion, any idiot can pour liquid nitrogen onto a CPU, get some ridiculous score, and then never see the benefits of tweaking it, right? You're never going to sit there with this nitrogen-cooled desktop or laptop and ever see any benefits of the effort you put in. However, the most constrained package, getting the most out of it you can, there's real benefits from it, and it's much harder. So instead of doing an in-depth, well, this will be a very in-depth review. I'll get all my thoughts out there, but it's not going to be super edited like my TV review, my Radeon 7 review, because frankly, I don't think it's going to get that many views. Maybe you guys will prove me wrong, but, well, hopefully you will, because I will cover everything. Now, let's get to reviewing this HP laptop. First of all, where am I coming from? Well, two things you need to know. First of all, I had the 2017 model of this, and on paper it has almost the exact same specs, so I wasn't expecting much getting this. But spoiler alert, it's about twice as good as the 2017 model, this 2019 model, and that blows me away. They've kind of tweaked every little thing to make it better. Now, why do I have this if I didn't think it would be much better? The other laptop disappeared. I think it's going to show up in like drywall or something in my house. It wasn't stolen. I was at home, but I can't find it. And I already have used this on a couple business trips. I need this laptop at all times. So if I can't find it in a week, guess I'm buying a new laptop. But yeah, I was rewarded because it is very good. Number two that I need to cover right away is, what do I look for in a laptop, right? And I think the way to put it is, I think the MacBook Air, the 13-inch MacBook Air from like 2014, 2013, that model perfected what I think the perfect laptop is. That's in between a Ultrabook and in between a netbook. Why? Why would you want that? Well, when you get in between an Ultrabook and a netbook, they typically have outstanding battery life, because it's honestly these days about the same size as what the first netbooks were, because they're thinner, but because it's that little bit wider, you know, it's not an 11-inch, it's not a 10-inch, it's a 13-inch, and it's ultra thin. So really, there's no 10-inch netbook that will fit in a bag that this won't fit in realistic terms. This fits in, I have a tiny work bag. It's this big. Like, I carry it like a man purse almost. And this fits in it. And that is ridiculous. You're not getting much bag smaller than that. So this is the min-max of small bags. That's why I like this size. And because it's a little bigger than a netbook, it typically has a ridiculous battery life, because it has that little bit more room to fit in that larger battery. Now, in addition to that, what I like is they typically have slightly better components than are what in a netbook, but they almost never go overboard, because it's not a 14 or 15-inch laptop. They don't try to shove some 45-watt processor and 50-watt graphics card into it. No, they usually shove one of the lower-end mobile graphics cards if they can, or they just completely uncap a 45-watt processor. And the reason this is good is you don't run into, honestly, a lot of the performance constraints you run into in the 14-inch form factor. So basically, they don't shoot for the moon. They have realistic expectations. It's a little bigger than a netbook, a little bit bigger battery life. It's a little bit bigger than a netbook. We can fit better components, but it's about the same. It's not that much bigger, so they rarely push it to the limits, and that means it's less annoying to deal with, less weird throttling issues like I had with that Vega laptop I sent back. 0 out of 10 review on that horrible, horrible laptop. Although I'm not blaming Vega, I'm blaming the implementation, just to be clear, everybody. Okay, so let's get to actually reviewing this thing. Now, what makes this laptop twice as good as the 2017 model? Well, honestly, where do I start? It's the everything. And again, I think HP nailed the perfect laptop when they made this in 2017. But I guess, yeah, let's just go down the list here. The touchpad's a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to deal with. The keyboard is the most satisfying keyboard I've had since, I don't know, like, it's better than a MacBook. They actually finally got the perfect amount of push clickiness. You're just going to have to trust me. It's perfect. The perfect amount for a slim laptop. And it is better than the 2017 model. Additionally, there's now a thumbprint reader. And that is so nice. You boot up the laptop. You don't need to click anything. You just press it and it logs in. Amazingly great. If the screen turns off, press the thumbprint. It unlocks and opens quicker than if you had to do any other way of unlocking or waking up. It's as quick as waking up a screen by just going like this. You just press the thumb thing. Awesome. Now, additionally, there's a camera off button, an SD card. Also, really, really nice. I added another, for like $10, I added another 128 gigabytes to put my editing files on while I'm on the go, freeing up storage on the base drive so it never slows down. Additionally, it's a little bit thinner, actually, than the 2017 model, and they use that USB trick where the USB thing opens up. Excellent implementation. Usually nothing's plugged in, but if you need the USBs, they didn't do this ridiculously stupid thing where they remove all USBs and just put USB-C. Completely not necessary. There's a USB-C here for output and a dock that you can buy for it, which it is powerful enough to feel like a desktop. So if you want to get a docked laptop and you don't need a game hardcore, this actually could be just your desktop. And there's two full USBs. So two full USBs and a USB-C for a dock. That's perfect compromise between a bunch of the ability to plug a bunch of things in and saving space. Perfect combination. They nailed it that time. Additionally, compared to the 2017 model, these speakers are like twice as loud. There were times where if I was going to sleep, it would be a little hard in bed to hear like a YouTube video over my air conditioning. A little hard. I could, but now, no such issue. If you're in a hotel room with your girlfriend or something and you want to watch something on Netflix and maybe it's a cheap place that doesn't let you pull up your account on the TV, you can put this in between you and you'll hear the speakers very, very well. And that has been a problem with me before. Again, they've doubled that. Additionally, the screen is now brighter, people, than before. That was never really an issue, but everything about this 4K IPS screen, I know the previous model was, it's just that much clearer and prettier. The colors pop that much more. Additionally, let's see, what do we even, I mean, basically every little thing has been tweaked and perfected to be better. And so I really couldn't give this a more glowing review compared to the previous model year. HP took a laptop that was getting glowing reviews, and they said, we're going to make it even better, and they did. Now, let's see. What cons might I give this? The only con I can give this, and this is on Amazon right now, there will be a link in the description, is battery life if you have the 4K IPS touchscreen. For me, that's a trade-off I'm willing to make, because I do so much editing for this YouTube channel on the go now. I want something that can fit in the smallest of bags if I take a 2-day trip for business, but I also want to be able to, if some development happens, edit together a video the same way my desktop does. And the fact is, that 4K IPS screen really does make it that much better at multitasking when I have it plugged in. So I'll take it. But that means a 5 to 6 hour battery life with the 4K screen, unless you do some pretty extravagant things with the processor, which I have. So it does still now get about 7 to 8, 9 hours, which is acceptable for me. But just keep that in mind at stock settings. Now, if you get the version with the 1080p screen, all reviews that I've seen state, no, it really gets a 10-hour battery life. So if you have a choice, maybe get the 1080p screen unless you're editing. That's the one thing I will say. And I guess the final thing I would go through here is just how much better this Whiskey Lake i7 is than the previous KB Lake one. Now, technically, they're both KB Lake R. It's really the same architecture, but it's a more perfected 14-nanometer node. The yield's a bit better. It does turbo boost at 4.6 gigahertz, and you will see it get there, surprisingly. The previous one I had, I believe, turbo to about 4.1 gigahertz. I think it was the i7-8550U. That would go to about 4 gigahertz, but it would be like a unicorn if you saw it actually get up there. It almost never would. But this one actually does. While I was encoding, or while I was formatting a hard drive, CPU was at 30% usage, it was running at 4.3 gigahertz flat for a minute straight. So this will turbo boost. The fact is, this feels every bit as responsive as my 6700K desktop. Now, gaming is a different story. You need to do some things to make sure it doesn't throttle, but that is what it does, and that is incredibly impressive. Again, this is an almost desktop replacement with some caveats. If you're going to game, it's 720p low settings, but it will actually run it. I played the Division 2 online with my friends. I'm playing co-op on this thing on the go. There's no crippling performance. It's in 1080p, low settings, and it just runs the Division 2. It does, at 30 frames, locked, no drops. That's really good for something this small, I think. That's what I look for in a laptop. Now, before I get to the tweaking settings, let's just see here. Anything else I need to cover? Oh, well, you know what? I guess I will say two more things then. The MX250 is basically snuck in there like an almost super APU. It's tiny. It's a 74 millimeter squared chip. It shares the heatsink with the i7. The idea NVIDIA has, since Intel's graphics haven't been improving for the past few years, will make a graphics card so small and low power that these system builders can throw it into their existing designs without really having to plan for anything. Well, I have a separate video on the overclocking settings. The one thing I would suggest is, it depends on the game. Some of them, you can just follow that guide. Set the clock to like 1000 megahertz, the lowest it will go. Following that guide. Again, you have to watch that guide to understand what I'm talking about. And if you do that, the graphics card, seriously, the NVIDIA graphics card will use like 5 watts, and that will mean it won't bog down your processor, right? It won't do that. So there's that. Additionally, one of the big differences between this laptop and the previous version of it I had is it has 2400 megahertz RAM instead of 1867. Guys, if you're a gamer and you're on DDR3, I think that might be bottlenecking your system by 30 to 40%. Because, I mean, even without taking throttling, right, even at its peak performance, this thing is gaming 40-50% better than the previous one. Sure, the CPU clock's 20% faster. Sure, the graphics card clock's 20-30% faster. But like a 50%? In some games, it was double. RAM is becoming a huge bottleneck if you're below 2400 megahertz now, or probably more like 2133. Keep that in mind, people. Keep that in mind. So, overall, this is the Ultrabook I recommend for people who want to play every game. You want to play Sekiro? Try it out. It'll boot up, 720p, 30 frames. Not perfect, but guess what? It runs without horrible drops to 16 frames or something like in another netbook. It actually runs if you follow my graphics card tweaking guide. And I really couldn't give a more glowing review. I wanted to get an AMD APU, but unfortunately it either didn't have the amount of storage I need at least half a terabyte for editing, or it cost more than the Intel counterpart. I think Zen 3 AMD will bring some true competition that can crush Intel. But until then, I guess this is what it is for now. And for the price, at least. For the price I got it for. So, very good review. Now, let's get to the Ultrabook tweaking part. Okay, so let's do this. Turning on the laptop. And, of course, I will switch to the screen. I have it set to auto start, the recording app I use on this laptop once it boots up. And should be just about there. Now, once this sucker boots up, you go here and you just put your thumbprint, and that sucker just gets going. So let's see here. Let's see how fast this thing actually gets to. I don't know what that's about. Actually gets to. There it is. There's what I will be using for screen capture for this. And so let's just switch to that now. And here we are. So this is capturing the entire screen. Now, the first thing I'll show you, and I did want to boot it up like this, is just so you could see there is a benefit to the boost clock. You know, it's not as much of a hindrance to have a lower base clock as you might think. There are real benefits to this thing boosting up, you know, to 4 gigahertz when you start up your PC. And one thing that I've really, really noticed with this is how responsive it is. It really is as responsive, if not actually a little more than my desktop with a 6700K. Now, this isn't a Threadripper. It's not going to break any Chrome tab loading Olympics, but it does do it significantly faster than you would think it would. You know, like just booting up WCCF really quick. Yeah, you can get there while it's loading all of my other trading tabs and email accounts. But let's get to tweaking. So, when you have an Ultrabook, the first thing I always do is mess with the battery settings. You right-click here and go to Power Options. And for many of you, I'm sure this is obvious stuff, but I don't know. You know, I named this Captain Special. I did that by creating a power plan. And, of course, I never want the computer to really go to sleep ever plugged in. I want the display to not turn off often. If I want the display to turn off, I will close the lid. And I have actually configured it so that lid close doesn't do anything. I just want to be able to close this and put it to the side. And because the screen actually uses the overwhelming majority of the energy, this thing will last 10 hours with the, you know, the lid closed, the screen off. There's no need for sleep mode. This has a blazing fast SSD. It boots up in, as you saw, about 5 to 10 seconds. There is no point in sleep mode, hibernate mode anymore, if you ask me. There's just no point in a modern computer. So, and I also have, of course, the power button to shut down. Now, one interesting thing I notice here that I usually would do is I would set maximum processor state to either 99 or 100% when plugged in, and then battery to like 80%, so it never goes above, I don't know, on this it'd be like 1.7 gigahertz. That can massively increase battery life by making sure it's never boosting and it stays below about 5 watts of you know, package usage. But this doesn't really let you do that. There's no limit option here. Clearly, HP and Intel want total control over when this boosts, for whatever reason. Now, that would annoy me normally, but on this one, I'm okay with it. So, next up, I use extreme tweaking utility from Intel. Sometimes I would use throttle stop, but lately it's just always been this. And I'll show you my settings I'm using now. Another thing to note is it seems like HP has locked out this. I know it says you can adjust power, but you cannot adjust power. Well, at least not the typical way, because you still can. And I don't know why they bother locking out things when there's ways to get around it. If you adjust amperage, if I were to set this, I'll just show you actually. Let's see. So if I set this to 10 amps, remember power is voltage times amperage. So if I set this to 10, remember stock voltage is like 1.1 volts. I've undervolted it. So this is like a 10 watt limit. If I set that, and look, now it's power limit. Yep. See, it's so silly. I see there, current limit throttling. It's so silly that they do that. But of course, I keep mine at the stock because I don't care if it hurts battery life now that I do so much editing and heavy tasks while moving around. I'll just take the 5-hour battery life and let this thing work like my desktop. But yeah, that's all the settings you'll want to adjust. Of course, maximize that turbo boost power time. It's just going to throttle if it gets too hot, but let this thing turbo above 1.8 gigahertz as long as it needs to. It's never really an issue. Oh, and don't forget to do this too. Since this does have an MX250, there's really no point in not limiting this a bit. I'll probably lower the amperage even more in the future. I just haven't played around with it enough. But you're going to want to undervolt the integrated graphics a bit too and limit how much power that can use, because that is a great way to just save battery life when you're not gaming on the go on this thing. It does turn off the MX250, and so, you know, take advantage of that. All right, so we've gone through all of that. And I do like to keep XTU as a startup app because this thing, once you apply it, even if you close XTU, it keeps it applied. But sometimes there will be stupid reason it doesn't apply. So I do just like this to boot up and appear on screen quick when I turn on my laptop. And then I just, you know, check that it says -115 and minimize it. All right, and now I'll touch on the MX250 quickly, but of course that will have its own video. Now, I actually use Asus GPU tweak too, and that's because it's buggy, but buggy in all the right ways. This has allowed me to basically turn my 10-watt MX250 into the performance of a desktop GT 1030, stronger than a stock 25-watt version of the MX250. There was no guarantee this would have worked when I bought this laptop, but I had a hunch I could find a way to undervolt and get this thing to not use more energy than it needs to. And let me show you how. And you do have to use GPU tweak from Asus. MSI Afterburner ain't working, guys. So this is my preferred mobile overclocking software. Now, if you look here, the big trick that I'll cover in depth on its own video, which is already out now, is that you actually set this allows you to set a linear boost. And remember, this turns off when it's not in use. So it's not like you're wasting energy when you're not gaming. This locks the voltage to the bottom one. Now, you're losing some boost clock, but it doesn't matter because this laptop will start throttling if you let it boost to 1800 megahertz anyways. So this really is a huge trick in mobile gaming here with 10-watt MX250s. But that'll be its own video, and now let's get to the rest of the laptop review. Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick and dirty review in conjunction with how I tweak my Ultrabooks when I get a new one. This is a great laptop, and I guess the last thing I'll say is this. This is why you want a 25-watt gaming laptop, even if you have to lower settings. Let's open it up. Let's hope I haven't been booted out of the room for not doing anything. Let's see. Oh, and of course, use my thumbprint to boot. Yeah, so the best thing about this is this. Whatever performance you get plugged in is exactly the same as when you're gaming. And when you're gaming on battery, it can go for 2 hours, right? Because especially how I've tweaked it, I've undervolted the NVIDIA graphics card to only use about 7 watts. I've limited the i7 to only use about 5 to 10 watts. So, yeah, this can game for a few hours on battery, just like a Nintendo Switch. On an airplane, if there's no plug, boot it up, start playing. You want to do some quick editing, don't have a place to plug in, it's not going to throttle like crazy because it isn't plugged in. It is a laptop. A laptop that can't reach peak performance on battery is not a laptop. It is a desktop with a battery taped to it, in my opinion. But that's my final words, right? All right, so tell me what you think in the comment section below. I think I'll do maybe one more video talking about the state of laptops just because of how weird things are getting with throttling. But yeah, subscribe to me if you like this. I have a lot of more desktop content. If this is the first thing you've seen on my channel, check that out and subscribe. Ring that bell button, of course, if you're a subscriber. And if you support me on Patreon, you can talk to me there on the Discord after the video. All right, thank you.